You know, when we talk about the program in general, and I've been thinking about this a long time, I think it might be good if we use the loan repayments to sort of use as a sort of like a jump start to get a jump start on maintenance, so we can kind of, the more we spend up front in terms of jump starting, it might help us in terms of if we focus on just on the backlog, and you can maybe comment on this idea. Jump start, it saves us more money in the long term in terms of future costs, so we can jump start the maintenance process. Is that?
I would agree, Mr. Chairman, that a direction of funding on preventative maintenance now will save you rehab costs later.
So if we look at those loans, like I don't know if she was estimating what they were, and we can use, the state has, there was a difference between the legislature and the governor on the rainy day fund and so forth, and I think we'll find out pretty soon what the balance is going to be at the end of the year, and we're going to have this money in the Prop 2, the rainy day fund, but we're eligible to pay back the loans with that, I think, and that's the question I asked. If that money could be used to like sort of jump start the maintenance, by doing that, is there a way of calculating that would cut the cost down in the future by funding early some of the maintenance as a strategy? And Mark, you had some comments?
Just one quick cautionary note. I think it's a great idea to use the loan repayments when they're available and apply them quickly to maintenance and accelerating that, thus lessening your costs. There is a complicating factor. The legislature and the administration recently in the budget process just reclassified the pre-Prop 42 loans, which is about half of the amount, as general fund obligations, and those were money specifically withheld since 2008 from a series of projects that are sitting there waiting for the money to come back. So I think half of it is available easily. The other half is a little more complicated policy.
Available given the current, would you estimate?
500. I think on the order of 150 million is programmed to a specific set of projects, leaving something like 330.
How much the total dollar amount of the?
Well, the total look,
loans is.
It'd be good to have a specific discussion at some point about loans, because there's a couple of important points. The first is that, the current loans, that 879 right now, is not in statute today an obligation of the general fund. It's an obligation of tribal gaming bonds funds. So that's one thing you got to deal with. Then I think the number is somewhere around 879 million in total. The current budget has that started to be repaid in 2016-17 going forward. And I think on the order of 330 million, I'm going to look at the staff, 330 million is not programmed to TCIF projects today. Is that right, Brian?
Well, is there somebody, we can look into that, okay? That's just what I'm saying.
Sure.
I think when I look at road maintenance, I look at like, okay, if we can get a big pot of money early to start up some of the, I'm talking about the simple repair kind of stuff. Yep. The simple jobs that can be let out early. That's kind of a pretty cost-effective way of spending money. Those jobs can be out real quick. I don't know, would the cities and counties agree with that, Vito?
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to address one other thing. I want you to know that we're not greedy. So just as a point of order, we came up with the $3 billion for counties. That's to take our roads over the next 10 years from up to a good condition. And how we work, and we believe in splitting the money. So just so you know, with the state, because we understand that people are driving on both systems right away. So that comes to $6 billion if you, and I like the way you're thinking that we have to come to a number, but through the polling, we know that spreading this out over a wide variety of sources, it's more palatable to the voting population. So don't think that I'm just trying to grab all the money and leave the state nothing, because that wouldn't make any sense. We're in this together. The systems are joined at the hip, so we feel it's important that the solution comes from both the state and the local.
I'm just trying, excuse me, I was just trying to sell new ideas. And if I'm going to create new ideas, I have to have
Yeah, work backwards.
some people that are supportive of the old money that's going their way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Berryhill, Senator Berryhill, you have some questions.
I do. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming here today and the committee members that stuck around for this very important hearing. Just a real quick comment, and then I do have a question that I think a number of you might be able to answer. But I want to defend the truckers here just for a minute, because I think they will, when you talk about adding bigger fees to our trucking industry, I think they will argue that over the last few years, as we've taken about $1 billion a year, that they would argue that they have been paying their fees. And so that's just kind of a sidebar. But my question is this, and it's kind of long, so hang with me here. Even if folks were able to get this tax through, what, if any, is there a guarantee that it will actually be spent on transportation? Because we've seen historically where we've done one thing and done another, promised one thing, done another. Because what's really different now? Do any of the proposed options provide protection from the legislature? Because right now, with all due respect to the chairman and the speaker, as I understand it, both the Atkins and Bell bills can be diverted with a simple majority vote down the road. Will the legislature, I guess the question is, will the legislature still continue to be able to divert these funds to other projects? And I think as long as we have this governor I think will hold the line. I've got all the confidence in the world. But boy, after 3 years, we get a new governor in here, he takes a look at this, and he says, well, that was that governor's deal. And it's a whole new day, and so this is only, and that's really when these projects would start. So I guess that's an open question to Mark, Jessica, Secretary Kelly, whoever.
Well, first a response from the chair. My bill is, the gasoline tax constitutionally protected. It has to be spent on roads, and that is protected in the state constitution. And so any increase or change in that, in terms of my bill, will be constitutionally protected in terms of roads, and any increase in revenues will be requiring a bipartisan vote. And I expect any changes in that will require a 2/3 vote. I don't anticipate trying to make some kind of majority vote switch. I guarantee you, Senator, that those votes will be bipartisan in anything that I propose as a solution for this.
Well,
So I totally will say that uniformly, that we will work together. We will not have any trapdoors or chutes and slides or anything like that in the legislation. We want to make this crystal clear that these are constitutionally protected and also require bipartisan support from our esteemed colleagues in terms of any changes that would divert revenue.
Mr. Chairman.
Of course, I have no intention of allowing any of that to happen myself. I will never vote for that.
well, I appreciate that, and I just kind of wanted to get that on the record, so thank you
Okay,
very
you
much.
got it on the record. I mean, I'm pretty clear about it. I mean, I think if we adopt something, it's a deal that we all have to live up to, and that's my commitment. And I don't know, Brian, do you have a comment?
Senator, yeah, I want to comment, but I think Ms. Peters wanted to reference her chart in the answer to the question on diversion.
On page number 1, this chart where we lay out the different options, where we talk about the allowable uses, for everything on that chart, with the exception of the vehicle license fee, all of those revenue sources are protected under Article 19 of the Constitution, so they can only be used for transportation purposes.
The other thing I wanted to add to the Senator was that I said earlier in my testimony, and I think in an answer to an earlier question, that we do think it's important that the source that you're going to choose, that we're going to work together to develop for transportation going forward, we think is very important that it's a non-general fund source, that it's a dedicated user-based source for transportation, and we think it is reasonable to ask that those be dedicated to transportation and not be movable. And I think we're open to discussing how to do that.
You know, my concern, because I understand that we're all trying to get to the right spot here. My concern is that over the years, I mean, Prop 42 pops to mind, to where, you know, that we overwhelmingly voted that this had to go to, and we find loopholes. And so I guess my question is, do you feel comfortable that by having a dedicated source that we would not be able to borrow from that?
I think, one, if a source has got constitutional protection in Article 19, there's some pretty strong sense that that's, unless, you know, later the legislature says don't use that source, use something else, but that source has a constitutional dedication. I would also say that if we're using other sources, maybe not on that chart, but they are user-based sources, you know, having a conversation about how to dedicate those and not move them going forward away from transportation is a conversation we would have.
The governor believes
In this process, I mean now, you know, to
the
do.
governor believes that if we come up with something, that's not going to be included, correct? Also,
Sorry.
does he share the same opinion that we should lock this in? And
I think he shares the opinion that if it's going to be a, you know, user-based, non-general fund source dedicated to transportation, that, you know, we will be helpful in getting the dedication people are looking for. We don't want to do this exercise with the intent of moving it away from what we're trying to accomplish.
and consequently, if it was a general fund source, that would leave it open for.
Well, look, what's the term? Past is prologue, right? I mean, we have over the years used sources that are traditional general fund sources to fund transportation, and in difficult times, they've been pulled back away from transportation. But in part, it's because we were playing in that. And look, the history is that transportation, when you're in difficult fiscal crises, don't do very well against healthcare and education and safety net and other things. And so that's why I think we would be suggesting that finding the user-based fee that's outside of the general fund and is the traditional way we funded transportation in California makes sense, and we ought to return to that.
And I think that's one of the things, as I mentioned in my first comments, that myself, I don't mind paying a tax if I know that money is going to go to what I voted for. But just as you just mentioned, historically, we just haven't done that. So if we can change that paradigm a little bit, you know, maybe this is a little bit easier to swallow at the end of the day.
This is my desire too, Senator, and I'd like to note that there's been proposals laid on the table in the other House that use up to over $2 billion in general fund sources, and I think that money is subject to any kind of budgetary action on a basis. So securing a concept that we want to have the funds secure, not rateable, if you want to say that, locked in, is exactly what we need to do to prevent what I talked about earlier. When you have chaos in the funding, you're going to have chaos in the programs. So you have to have a locked-in, regular source, ongoing source that allows a efficient planning and use of the funds. And Senator Leyva has some comments. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, you're good.
As we look at these funding sources and as we look at possibly charging more for people who use the roads more, I understand that philosophically, I get that. I have a similar situation if I compare myself with my mom, how much she drives and how much I drive. But when I think of my constituents in the district, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of them drive into Los Angeles every day or from the Inland Empire. They don't make that 2.5-hour commute each way because they want to. They do it because that's where the jobs are. So are we then penalizing them even further for a situation that they find themselves in because there are not jobs? Yeah, I do look at it as part of my job to help bring good jobs to the district, but not quite there yet. So let's just enter into that cautiously and make sure we really communicate that to those.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, you have some comments on
Just a real quick.
balancing act we're dealing with here. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it was that foundational thought that you just expressed that we found amongst the voters that gave rise to the idea of let's spread it. So they feel that they can adjust whatever their trends are going to be, whether they're going to buy a new car or defer because of the license fee or the reg fee. So it just has a better feeling of fairness to them. So that's part of the equation here, I think.
I haven't heard that from them yet, but I'll keep.
Yeah, no,
Mark, how did the focus groups in the survey respond to Senator Berryhill's concern about the funding, and looking at the future?
well, first and foremost,
Sure that was a question you asked them.
yeah, we did discuss with them, and they raised on their own their concern and distrust with government and questioned where the money would go. So we responded to that by putting ideas together that they ended up endorsing when we went to our survey. So lockbox, constitutional protection, things like that resonate very well. And I just add one more comment, if I might, Mr. Chairman. The industry that Transportation California and Alliance for Jobs represent, contractors and allied labor, strongly endorse the discussion here about don't want to go down the general path anymore. We were the leaders in Prop 42. We actually ran it on the ballot, and we did the protection measures in Prop 2022. And we don't want to have that unstable atmosphere anymore. It got so bad at one point during the process that contractors had to front their own contracts for a period of a month or two in one of the bad budget debates. So we don't want to go down that path again.
Okay, thank you. We're going to open it up for, Senator Allen, excuse me.
I mean, I think Senator Leva's comments underscore the fact that we do have a transit crisis, right? So all that wear and tear on the roads that are happening because people are having to drive so far, that has to do with our housing problem, it has to do with our jobs problems. But certainly if there were ways that we could get, your folks and my folks to train stations, taking those trains into this big job centers in downtown, that would be so helpful. So it just kind of underscores the need for cap and trade to be going toward transit. And when we're looking at these new fees, road user charge, et cetera, managed lanes, are we making sure that the funding is going to be flexible enough to allow for alternatives and transit-friendly streets and roads and highways? And so I just want to keep banging away on that.
I will keep banging on that too. I think the cap and trade money, we ought to definitely spend more money on transit. And I heard, I even heard Senator Cannella talk about the ACE train as something he was concerned about. So I think those kinds of projects need to be funded in the cap and trade program, and we ought to have a more robust transit program in the cap and trade program. Thank you very much, all panelists. And we'll now hear from any public speakers that would like to address us. Are there any people who would like to address us? Is that transit project go through? The ACE train? Yeah, that's what I thought. I think that some of you guys would. My brother lives in Bethesda. He keeps complaining about it. I don't know if it goes down to Bethesda. It doesn't. That's why he's complaining about it. He's giving me a hard time. Okay. Okay, let's hear from some public. Okay. Yes, sir. Why don't we start over here? Introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Tim Chang for the Auto Club of Southern California and AAA of Northern California, Nevada, and Utah, collectively AAA. Before I get into my brief statement, I'd like to say that, of course, the devil's in the details, but we are encouraged by what we heard in today's informational hearing. We appreciate this opportunity to provide comment on road conditions and the transportation funding issue facing California and this body, and we look forward to participating in discussions during the special session. California's network of highways and roads provides the backbone of the state's economy, the movement of goods throughout the state, and the quality of life for California residents. Unfortunately, California's roads have not been adequately maintained and are consistently rated in poor condition in national expert evaluations. As we've heard in today's hearing, numerous proposals are under consideration to increase road repair funds and address other problems. Proposals include returning transportation funds to their intended purposes, improving efficiency, increasing fees or taxes to generate more revenue. Additional investment in roads is needed, but the first and necessary step must be to ensure that existing motorist taxes and fees and other transportation funds are used as they were intended to be, to repair and improve roads. This includes returning truck weight fees to the state highway account without increasing motorist taxes to backfill those funds. As you've heard today, truck weight fees, about $1 billion annually, were redirected to pay general obligation transportation funds under 1B. This happened despite the promise made clearly to voters in the Proposition 1B pamphlet that the general fund would pay for those bonds. The AAA strongly supported Proposition 1B, and in fact, our CEO signed the ballot argument in favor of it. California motorists pay more in fees and taxes than motorists in all other states. They annually pay $12 billion in taxes on gasoline, vehicle registration, and related fees, the state's car tax, and costs of the state's cap and trade program. Before asking Californians to pay more, existing funds must be well used and as intended, and they must be protected, as we've discussed here, to ensure that they are not diverted or loaned away in the future. Another important issue that needs to be addressed and be part of any solution is to improve efficiencies. We've also discussed that here, and to modernize project development and implementation processes. Doing so will save time, money, and provide more resources to fix the state's highway system. Without these foundational changes, we believe it will be both unfair and unreasonable for the state to ask California drivers to pay more through taxes and fees. Thank you, and AAA looks forward to working with this legislative body to craft fair and appropriate solutions to increase investment in road repairs and to ensure that motorist taxes and fees are well spent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Robinson on behalf of the California Transit Association. We heard from several members up here today, and I think we just echo their comments about really encouraging this discussion to be more than just about local streets and roads, but a multimodal discussion. Our transit systems throughout the state face about a $39 billion in deferred maintenance, and $70 billion if you want to count the projects that are necessary to implement the SCSs under SB 375. In many areas of the state, such as in San Mateo County, which touches your district, Senator, our highways just we can't add more capacity to those, and transit is the solution there. We're looking at electrifying Caltrain, improving that service, but it takes funding to do those kinds of things. Our state's going to be adding 5 million people in the next 10 years, and there is very little room for those 5 million people to travel on our existing infrastructure in terms of our streets and roads. And so I think we would just really encourage, again, to consider a multimodal funding solution as you guys come up with the package in the next couple of months. There was a lot of talk today about Prop 1B. About a quarter of that funding went to transit. And so the last time we really did a big slug of funding into our system, we did count the needs of transit in that discussion. And so we asked for that again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Jeannie Wardwaller with the California Bicycle Coalition. I want to thank your whole committee for this effort. We're very supportive of the focus on transportation revenue and the Fix It First. We shared a letter already with all of the offices of members participating in the special session on behalf of 26 organizations that represent environmental, climate, health, equity, and transportation advocates to kind of help frame this discussion. I'll just highlight real quickly, we had sort of 5 main points. We want to see all of the investments that we talk about here analyzed for their impact on climate and greenhouse gas emissions, and really focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a priority, along with climate resilience and adaptation. Secondly, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the needs of mobility and safety for underserved residents in communities that have really been most negatively impacted by our transportation investments and also have not benefited from transportation investments in the past. The mayor of San Jose said this earlier, but my third point is just to take advantage of maintenance opportunities on our roadways to make multimodal improvements that help get people out of their cars, like bicycle and pedestrian facilities. This also helps to alleviate the burden on the roadway and improve goods movement, as Senator Leyva said. My fourth point, just to add to Matt Robinson's comment, is to make sure we're also investing in transit as a multimodal transportation system. And then finally, let's also make sure that we're enhancing our natural resources, wildlife corridors, and agricultural lands with all of our transportation investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other speakers, please.
Joshua Stark with Transform, an organization dedicated to sustainable and equitable land use and transportation policies. Also to have my comments mirror those of Ms. Ward-Waller, and I also appreciated the comments of Matt Robinson earlier at CTA. We support those two comments. We are signatories of the letter of over 26 organizations. We'd like to also commend the legislature on its recent efforts to address the transportation infrastructure problem, but also its efforts to address climate change through the likes of AB 32, SB 375, and others. We feel that these have, as SB 375 pointed out, and as is shown through the cap and trade process, transportation is a vital component in addressing climate change in the future. We have a real opportunity here to invest in the kinds of projects that reduce congestion and improve safety at the same time that they do tackle climate change. Bringing transit networks up to a state of good repair and expanding transit ridership offers an opportunity there to move more people with fewer vehicles, resulting in less congestion and also potentially less road damage. So there is a direct nexus with the transportation infrastructure conversation in the special session. Additionally, transit investments, or transportation investments, pardon me, should prioritize the mobility, safety, and air quality needs of our most disadvantaged communities and avoid negative impacts on those communities. In particular, Southern California and the Central Valley, are going to need to, as I've heard it put yesterday, electrify almost everything in order to meet their air quality standards. And that's not to say that the air quality standards are too strict. Currently, 1 in 4 children have a respiratory distress problem in the Central Valley, and 1 in 5 children have asthma, which means if you're a teacher in a room, you have like 4 or 5 inhalers in your desk. I was a teacher in the past, and so I kind of think of it from that perspective, but you have to watch for children coming under respiratory distress every single day in your classroom. And these are issues that are directly related to transportation infrastructure in the Valley and in Southern California. Additionally, transportation revenue collection should take into account equity impacts of regressive taxation, and also ensuring that if collection is going to have a regressive impact, that you are more than mitigating that impact in the transportation investments that you're making. Currently, the gasoline tax is almost doubly regressive in its burden on folks who are lower income. The lower your income, the more percentage of your income you pay in gasoline tax per gallon. So Transform is happy to work and is continuing to work on the longer-term solution offered by a road usage charge, but I also felt that it was appropriate to bring up in the context of the current discussion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers. Any final comments from senators? Thank you, everybody, and we will continue the discussion in the special session. And this meeting of this committee is adjourned.